everyone. Good afternoon. You're all welcome today. I hope you can hear me. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Victoria, the host for today's panel, and I am part of the team in Filii Magna. It's truly an honor to welcome everyone to today's panel, and it's an honor to welcome everyone to the Globalization Talk series, everyone. So this panel started on Tuesday, and today we are having the second out of the 4 panels, Globalization and Trade. This panel is hosted by Filii Magna. Filii Magna is a premium travel consultancy company that provides consultancy and advisory in the travel sector. And this is our 4th year of operation in Nigeria with partnership and business operation in the UK and North America. And I am delighted to be working from our Nigerian office. You're all welcome today. So this is not, I won't be here for long. I'll be introducing the moderator who will be taking over. Our moderator, Chinwe Egrim. Chinwe Egrim is an experienced economist, a corporate executive, an investor, an author, and an advocate. She's the senior economist at FBN Quest Merchant Bank, an arm of FBN Holdings, one of the largest banking and financial services organization in Africa. So I hope we enjoy today's panel and we learn a lot from it. So I'll see you after today's panel. Over to you, Chinwe. You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Victoria, for that. Thanks.
Thank you. You're welcome.
I'm just trying to get my video up. I don't know if it's up. Okay, so welcome to the Filii Magna's Globalization and Trade series. Today's session is focused on the impact of globalization on trade in diversifying markets. I have 2 amazing speakers joining me on this panel, and I am confident that every participant will benefit from their wealth of knowledge. So if you have not already done so, I advise you to please get your pens and notepads ready. Just use the notepad app on your phone. So I'm going to introduce both speakers now. The first, Akintunde Oyebode. Akintunde is an economist passionate about sustainable development, finance, investment, and youth employment. He began his career as a research assistant at the Lagos Business School, and spent over a decade in various banking roles with First City Monument Bank, that's FCMB, and Stanbic IBTC Bank, where he was the country head of SME banking. He was also the pioneer executive secretary of the Lagos State Employment Trust Fund, where he led the development of programs that provided loans of over 6 billion naira to 10,000 beneficiaries, employability training for over 5,000 unemployed Lagosians, with job placement to almost 2,000 people, and workspace vouchers for 100 startups. During his time at LSETF, the institution supported the creation of 10,000 jobs in 3 years, leading to a verifiable reduction in Lagos State's unemployment rate, despite an overall increase in unemployment across the country. Akin voluntarily left his role at LSETF and was subsequently appointed as special advisor to the governor of Ekiti State on investment, trade, and innovation, and director general of the Ekiti State Development and Investment Promotion Agency. In this role, he was responsible for Ekiti State's investment promotion activities and business environment reform. He led the attraction of investment announcements of over $2 billion in less than 2 years. Akin is currently the Honorable Commissioner for Finance and Economic Development of the Ekiti State Government. Thank you so much for being here, Akin.
Thank you.
I will go ahead. Yeah, I'll go ahead to introduce my other speaker. Interestingly, both of you are namesakes. So I'm going to have to call the name in full so you know who I'm referring to. So Akinyinka Akintunde is the Vice President of Financial Markets at AFEX Commodities Exchange Limited. He joined as Business Development Manager in 2016. He has diverse teams under his leadership and has spearheaded the firm's endeavor to leverage technology to transform agriculture in Nigeria, while using innovative human-centered approaches in developing products that are set to transform the investing landscape. He secured his MBA from Lagos Business School with a certificate in corporation innovation from Stanford Graduate School of Business. He specializes in strategy, finance, capital markets, product development, and business technology. Welcome, Akinyinka. It's good to have you here.
Thank you. Good to be here, and it's good to be on the same panel with my big Egbon, Mr. Akin. Good to be here. I'm looking forward to a fruitful conversation.
Yes. So let's dive. Let's go straight to it. So, you know, the importance of trade in economic development cannot be overemphasized. Trade influences economic growth, employment, and balance of payments. So it is therefore pertinent that in order to achieve economic resilience and reap the benefits of globalization, an economy must promote exportation, create an enabling environment for exports, effectively leverage its comparative advantages. Export promotion initiatives driven by the federal and state governments are required to unlock the benefits of a larger market. This is further underscored by the fact that subnational governments are in a better position to understand the challenges that hinder trade in their region or states and can create better incentives tailored to their respective comparative advantages. I'm sure you already know who I'm about to throw my question to. So Akin, what deliberate steps would you say subnationals are taking to boost exports from their states? It would be good to hear how maybe Ekiti State is positioning itself with regards to plugging into export activity.
Thanks, Chinwe. You promised to in full, so we know which Akin you're addressing, but I guess this is my question.
Yes, your question.
Happy to pass it off to Akin because it's pretty difficult to articulate. we are here together. But I mean, honestly, I think for me, it's less a national issue, but primarily a national recognition that we must focus a lot more on export. So our trade policies at the moment have been fairly protectionist, focused on protecting domestic markets and supporting local production. But I think that if we learn from some of the things we've seen in, for example, Korea, export discipline has to be a very deliberate policy of government, both at national, but then subsequently at subnational level. In Ekiti, there are two critical sectors I'd like to highlight that support that drive for export discipline. The first is our Ekiti Knowledge Zone project, which is effectively setting aside a special economic zone for services in Ekiti. And the idea is that SEZ will support digital innovation, will support business process outsourcing, and provide us an opportunity to export services from Nigeria first to the rest of the continent and subsequently the rest of the world. So we see ourselves as potentially competing with the Philippines, Vietnam, India, etc., as possible business process outsourcing hubs. Secondly, on agriculture, I believe that we have a unique opportunity to start to improve the quality and quantity of agri exports from Nigeria. Our focus on agriculture is ensuring that we can export from our soon-to-be constructed Ekiti cargo airport. But I always say that an airport in itself is just a physical space. What is important, and this is why I say it's a national and subnational issue, what is important and what we're trying to build is the inspection capabilities that ensures that, for example, if you want to export bananas out of Ekiti, what tends to happen today is that the bananas are packed, sent to an airport, and it's at the airport where these bananas are then inspected, pallet by pallet. Of course, it will take 3 or 4 days or 5 days even to complete that inspection. And by that time, 70% of your export is rotten. So what we also require is the Nigerian Customs Services to support the inspection of some of these, especially perishable agri exports, to support their inspection in the farmlands, such that they inspect, they pack, and when these exports are packed, they are pre-authorized for shipment. So that's how I think the national and subnational partnership can work. But those two sectors are the sectors I would say from a subnational perspective in Ekiti we're focused on. And I think every subnational must pick 1 or 2 critical areas and just address those as areas of focus. What's important is that we don't have the fiscal capacity to try to do this in different places. I'll stop.
Okay, thanks. Thank you so much, Akintunde. I will say your full name. But just latching onto what you said, I have another question for you. You've been in the private sector and now in the public sector. I'd like to hear your thoughts around attracting private sector investments into export-related projects within states or subnational. So, because it seems like states struggle to attract these sort of investments. So I really want you to please share your thoughts around this, because I feel like private sector support would help to accelerate development within this export segment. You're on mute. Can you hear me? You're on mute, Akintunde.
Oh, sorry. I thought that was for, that's for me as well, right?
Yes, it's for you.
Okay. Okay. So, I think, look, and I hear the conversation around private capital. I think private capital competitiveness. I think that the proof that you're a competitive economy is how much private capital is attracted in whether it's a national or subnational economy. In Ekiti, and I think that what we're trying to do is to be a standard of the country. What we've done is to focus first on governance. So we repealed and reenacted our public-private partnerships law to provide a best-in-class framework that gives the private sector enough confidence that if they bring capital to collaborate with government, because private capital is worried about the political cycle. And so it's important to show that regardless of who's in office, the principles don't change. So what we've done is to provide a lot of comfort and security to the private sector, that even if we were not the government in office, whatever concessions or whatever agreements that have been signed with us are sacrosanct, and that if those agreements are broken, they are broken at a significant cost. The second thing is building a best-in-class investment promotion agency. What we do at EGDIPA, which I am no longer responsible for, but I had the honor and privilege of starting, is to ensure that investors have a single point of contact. When you bring your capital and expertise into a location, you don't want to worry about talking to 12 to 15 agencies of government. Entrepreneurs are really impatient, and for good reason. They see an opportunity, they have the scale, they have the capital, and they want to chase that opportunity. They don't want to be distracted by bureaucracy. By definition, entrepreneurship is looking to leapfrog some of these challenges. So our role as an investment promotion agency in Ekiti State, the role of our IPA is to provide a single point of contact to entrepreneurs. Do you want to register title? Do you want to register your business premises? Do you even want to get pioneer status from the investment promotion people? We will work with NIPC in Abuja to help you process, your pioneer status. So what we are saying to investors is literally, come with your capabilities, come with your capital, and we will help you solve bureaucracy from a single point of contact. So that's a critical thing I see that helps, to improve private capital coming into a society. Ultimately, you resolve some of the macro issues. We must be very clear about how we determine and the methodology of determining the exchange rate, for example. Because when you bring in foreign direct investment, for example, what the investors, and I always say to people that a devaluation is not necessarily a bad thing. What is important is the predictability of your policy. So people want to know, even if the Naira is 380 today at the official market, what using just regular macroeconomic theory, where do we see the currency in a year? And if they price that risk in, then they can, very effectively sort of estimate their return, right? It's not a perfect science, but what people want is predictability. So what we are offering at subnational level is that, look, the policies won't change. You won't come in and then we'll switch the goalposts. What we're offering at subnational level is that we'll give you a single point of contact to make your entry into our state fairly easy. And one of the things that excites me the most, Chinwe, and to everyone on the call, is states are becoming alive. They're coming alive, to this responsibility. So this is not an Ekiti story. Kaduna has a fairly strong IPA. Nasarawa has a fairly strong IPA. Ondo has a strong IPA. Oshun has just started one. Anambra, strong IPA. So if you go around the states, across the 6 geopolitical zones, there's evidence that there are people who are taking investment promotion very serious. And that competition between subnationals is only good for the national, because it means that subnationals are going to unpack some of the issues around enforcement of contracts, some of the issues around access to finance, some of the issues around land titling, etc. And as all these subnationals compete, all that happens is that Nigeria as a country becomes a lot more attractive for foreign capital. So I think that, honestly, if you ask me, it's a pretty interesting time. What we just need to be clear about as a country is that, one, we can enforce contracts properly, and that private investors come in here and know that there's sanctity of contracts, that we uphold the sanctity of contracts. 2 is that our macro policy is fairly predictable. It's less about the outcome, it's more about the predictability of the policy making. And for me, 3 is simply that when Nigeria is positioned both from Nigeria's specific macro story and being the fulcrum of the regional economy, even if it's sub-regional, even if we say West Africa, Nigeria is it still remains a very attractive market for people looking to get an inroad into West Africa and subsequently the continent. So in summarizing, I think my point is a lot of the work we're doing in Ekiti is supported by private capital. Ekiti state government is not rich enough to build a special agro-industrial processing zone, to build a knowledge zone, to build an airport, and still ensure that people can go to hospitals and get treated, people can go to school, we can protect the security and secure lives and property. So we are talking to even people like AFEX, to say, hey, how do you support our farmers? And how do you securitize that against the produce that you get at the end of the cycle? So we're very keen to attract private capital across multiple sectors in Ekiti. And I'm sure that this is a common thread across other subnationals.
Thank you so much for that, and very encouraging words from you. I'm happy, or I like hearing the part on sustainability, policy sustainability, because I think that has been a key issue for Nigeria. So it's good to hear that. Coming to you, Akinyinka, the ongoing pandemic has re-emphasized the importance of supply chains and trade in general. Given Nigeria's inability to effectively diversify its exports, the country's Achilles heel was exposed on the back of the oil price decline, triggered by, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic. Can you walk us through your thoughts around the impact of this recent pandemic on future trade patterns?
Thank you, Chinwe, for that. And I'm glad Mr. Akintunde already gave us some perspective as to the role the government is playing at the subnational level. Because if you look at it in an holistic manner, there's no way you can disassociate the role government plays, either the federal, state, or local governments, from ensuring a seamlessly functional supply chain. Now, COVID-19 came upon everybody, right? We were not prepared for it. No country was prepared for the impact the pandemic had on global trade. But if you notice something, one of the first key areas that most economies had to be very, very protectionist about is in terms of their food security, right? So borders are closed. The first thing is, do we have enough stock to feed our citizens, right? If you are very conversant on social media, you must have seen one of these information about United UAE saying that the citizens should not worry, that they have more than enough to feed them, right? But unfortunately, if you bring it locally to Nigeria, we don't have that stance. And it seems like across our value chain, there's a disconnection across in terms of the role the private sector plays and the role the government should play in terms of ensuring this food security. And if you look at the supply chain, in Nigeria, we currently have a very, very weak supply chain in terms of infrastructure. So if you look across the country, when farmers harvest their commodities, which is the source of most of the food that are consumed locally, the first point of call for them to store these goods will probably be in their houses or under their beds, right? And what this implies is there's no way for the central government, either at the federal level or the state level, to monitor what is being produced at that local level. And if you don't have data on what is being produced, the same way you have information on population, then it's going to be difficult for you to know what should be put in place in terms of food security for your citizenship, right? Now, it's clear when you look at global statistics, the indication is that global trade has slowed down, right? Nigeria's importation from China reduced drastically. The economy has collapsed, with projections being that we're likely going to experience negative growth over the next couple of months, over the next couple of quarters. And this means that activities in the local economy, as declined as it is, prices are likely going to go higher, which will put in more strain across the citizenship. And the question will now be, how do we fix this, or how do we minimize this impact? And it's always heartwarming to see what states like Ekiti State government is doing in terms of being futuristic. Mr. Aki mentioned some things earlier, which I think are pertinent to this conversation. Presence of technology ops, role of government, and efficiency in administration. Can you have one-stop shop for every administrative activities that regards agriculture? And that's how we want all government agencies to be thinking in terms of the appropriate structure to ensure that the supply chain remains robust as much as possible. Yes, the conducive environment is very good. It's good for the government to be protectionist about his approach to some key aspects of the economy, but without some enabling pillars in place, there's little what the government could do. These days, technology is taken for granted because it's supposed to be one of your key pillars in whatever it is you do. A buzzword that is flying around now is embedded tech, meaning every organization has what is called embedded technology on which it builds its business. Now, how do you compete with the likes of China, with the likes of India, with the likes of US as a country like Nigeria? Developing infrastructure takes time and is the key role of the government. But the government needs to provide an enabling environment to ensure that they can attract the capital to develop this sector. When Mr. Akin was saying, he was talking about the role of exchange rate stability, whether it's high or low. And it's funny enough because he mentioned Korea. If you look at the Korean exchange rate, it's about 1,000 plus one to the US dollar. But the Korean economy is one of the fastest growing and one of the most advanced technologically in the world, right? Now, how do they manage to do this? The exchange rate is very, very fairly stable in a fair and transparent manner. any investor or any activities in the economy will be fairly predicted on the backdrop of what is currently obtainable. Do we have that in place in Nigeria? How focused is our central government, and what are the incentives the central government is putting in place, the central bank in this case, to ensure that there's a stability in your foreign exchange rates? Because as a country, Nigeria in particular, you don't want capital to be leaving your country at this time when you are in their need of critical infrastructure to develop the economy. Now, when you have the infrastructure in place, it's just the first step towards the development of the economy. So you need good roads, good rail network, good warehousing facilities. We can't overflow these issues. But there are the things that are being put in place to ensure efficiency in the system. After developing this infrastructure, next thing that needs to be put in place. If you are conversant with latest news, there was an article in Business Day today that spoke about corruption that has invested in Nigeria, the railway corporation that moves from Abuja to Kaduna, how people buy it and inflate the cost of these tickets to ensure that people don't get it. And even if they get it about 3 times the cost price. Now, this cannot lead to development because there's no structure for you to effectively and efficiently administer the resources you have. And when you increase the load on the consumers of these things, then there's limited growth you can get because the core users don't even believe in the system. And when that is the case, you discover that there will be multiple systems. Parallel market that promotes inefficiencies in the system because other people could access what should be normally available. And if you look at this situation, it's not hard to fix. Why can't you have a technology system in place where you can buy your train tickets online and travel with it? But because of inefficiencies in the system, people still hold on to ways that ensures that that growth is limited to the enrichment of a few people in the sector. It's very key, first of all, for Nigeria to be able to grow and compete favorably in the current pandemic situation we found ourselves. First is, can we diversify our source of earnings? I know this issue is overflowed, and that is the first point everybody makes. But it's very, very crucial because if you look at it, when you're competing with big countries in the world, that structure to ensure that your local supply is in place, then you will not have any direction in which you are working towards to ensure sustainability. Now, can we get there in a day? No. But can we start putting the appropriate structures in place that will ensure that 5 years, 10 years down the line, the government has a diversified revenue source? And you can give the state government, especially looking at Ekiti State as a case study, you can give them the kudos because they're already setting up the structure that should be able to function independent of the current administration, right? When the current administration moves on, whoever is taking on should be able to continue this work and ensure that sustainability is present there. We've mentioned the embracing technology. There's no way we can grow this economy without infusing technology to drive our activities. And the good thing about Nigeria is every nook and corner, you see this raw talent of youths that are basking in technological innovation that are looking for avenues to express themselves. There's hardly any global tech giant that has not come to Nigeria to visit and inspect the technology innovation that is going on there. Some years ago, we had Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg in the country. We have Mark Dorsey of Twitter in the country. A couple of times, Bill Gates has been around. The Google team has a functional office in Lagos in the country, which shows that Nigeria is very, very much overripe for technological explosion. And we have the capacity to be able to compete with the likes of India, with the likes of USA. But what the problem is, or the question is, what are we doing? What are we putting in place to ensure that either the pandemic or no pandemic, we can develop this technology stack to ensure that the engine that drives innovation in the country continues to run. AFEX Commodities Exchange, as a case study, we play in the agricultural space. So our game is engaging smallholder farmers, create an enabling environment for them, unlock financing for them, buy commodities from them. But underpinning all of this is a strong technology structure, because we believe that to drive efficiency across our structure, we need to ensure that our technology stack is very, very much in place. And that complements everybody. We are not a tech company, we're a full-fledged financial company, but all our resources, all our activities are hinged on technology. And thirdly, you can't isolate the role Nigeria plays from the role of Africa in global trade. We need to find a way to promote intra-country trade in Nigeria. So if you look at AFCTA and all these political agreements that are flying around, how do we ensure that we get an harmonized structure that ensures that efficiency could be driven across the continent? Africa is projected to be $1 trillion economy that could drive global food supply over the next decade. But if we still have barrier across the countries in the continent, then there's limited growth that we could enhance at that level. So all in all, I'll say the role of technology in administering effective use of resources cannot be overemphasized. And the sooner government starts looking at that direction, putting the appropriate structure in place to drive it, the better off for us. And we need to work with the mindset that Rome was not built in a day. We need to start putting the structures in place that will drive the efficiency we desire in future structures of the country, of the economy.
Thank you so much for that extensive response. Thank you. I soaked in a whole lot from what you just shared with us. I'm going to go back to Akintunde and just talk about infrastructure, just your thoughts around infrastructure. So an obvious challenge, of course, is poor infrastructure. And there are lots of examples from countries across Africa. Gabon is worth highlighting. Transporting timber in its raw form to other African countries from Gabon is very expensive. To put this in perspective, it costs about 5 times more than sending that same product to India due to poor or non-existent transport links. So I think my question is, are there specific investments targeted towards improving strategic logistics projects, such as the road corridors from Nigeria to other African countries? I know you may not be a core player in this space, but I just want to add your thoughts around this. Akintunde.
Thanks, Chinwe. I think to help to a lot more regional. And despite the best intentions of the AFCFTA, if we don't solve, cross-border logistics challenges, we know what that has done to the cost of trade. There are 2 things policy side, just the concept of passporting policies across the continent. If you, for example, want to set a requirement for setting up a processing company in Greece, that allows you to set up similar businesses across the continent, right? So that saves you a lot of money in just meeting country-specific legislation or country-specific requirements. So that's on one side. I definitely think that one of the things that the Continental Free Trade Agreement should look to do is to help us understand how we can, passport some of these policies, across countries. The second, obviously, is the logistics cost, right? And I think for me, the biggest element there is just the quality of our seaports. If we have more functional, the Durban seaport, for example, is a very good example of a very efficient seaport. And just because of the efficiency of that port and how quickly cargo is processed through that port, you find that even some Eastern African cargo will prefer to berth in Durban and then ship and then truck their goods, thousands of kilometers to their final destination, because it's still cheaper to berth in Durban than it is to berth in Mombasa, right? And have your goods stock, on the high seas for maybe 5 to 7 days. So one thing I definitely think that we need to do in Nigeria is Lome, for example, has unveiled its fairly attractive and frankly very imposing seaports. Tema in Ghana, is potentially going to be the same. So I'm very keen to see what Nigeria is going to do with the Lagos port, right? And I'm very keen to see what and this is a great PPP example, right? So where there's private sector money and capabilities, there's some government involvement, because what is clear is that APAPA is, there's only so much you can do to it, right? Functionally, it just can't work anymore. So I think that the first thing to do is to invest a lot more in our port infrastructure, but it's fairly expensive, because for a lot of the country, it's also how do we pick these locations, right? Ideally, you should be picking draft encourages a deep sea port. What we've done, and this is not a criticism to any government, certainly not the current government, but what we've done over the last 30 or 40 years is that we've picked locations based on political interests. So whether it's a shallow draft becomes secondary. We want a port in XYZ town because we want federal character, right? What is important is let's focus on where the natural endowments exist. You know, Africa by definition, geographically, is disadvantaged in terms of just water bodies, right? But we now create additional man-made disadvantages by locating our ports in the least attractive locations. So that for me is the first thing. The second thing is to understand that if you do this properly, road transportation is fairly expensive compared to the rail lines. So I'm very happy that the Lagos-Kano line, for example, in Nigeria is finally being constructed properly. Because what you want to do is you want to get goods first within your country, and you want to get goods moved efficiently within your country before you start to think about cross-border opportunities. So it's interesting, Chinwe, that you ask about what we can do to connect with other African countries. Yet, if you go to social media today, there are a lot of derogatory comments about Nigeria building a railway to nowhere, right? Because the railway connects Nigeria to potentially to the Republic of Niger. But what we don't realize is the reason people make those comments is really, I think, sometimes partly ignorance, but it's also because we haven't optimized domestic logistics, right? So if you could move your goods from Lagos to Kano fairly easily, then extending a rail line to Niger becomes a non-issue. So it's the real concern is let's first deal with the domestic issues, and then let's start to now solve the regional issues. So I will be more interested in a rail line that connects countries first, because I think for trade, the rail line will definitely be cheaper than road. But at the roads, we also need to be very clear about the proliferation of security and immigration agencies across our borders. If you've ever traveled from Nigeria to the Republic of Benin, you would have met maybe 15 checkpoints, each of them extracting a tax, which increases the cost of doing business. You know, so it's impossible for you to say you want to trade with even your neighbors when moving from one location to the other becomes fairly difficult. Meanwhile, this is a sub-region where there should be free movement of people. So to Accra, you should to travel fairly, you know, and not being able to do that, of course, as an individual, you know, you can now imagine how much more if you were moving goods and goods across the country. So for me, it's let's focus on the critical things. Let's focus on our seaports, and secondly, let's focus on our rail infrastructure. I think roads are last mile. For goods, for trade, roads are a luxury, right? Let's get the rail lines working. Let's get the seaports working. Will be my primary areas of investment.
Well, thank you so much for that. I completely agree with you. And I'm hoping that this session, we will be able to share all these nuggets beyond the participants, because I feel like so many people need to hear the kind of wisdom bullets that both my speakers are releasing today. Okay, so Akinyinka, I am a heavy data user by nature of my role as an economist, and I applaud your organization for the frequent release of reports on export commodities. I'm one of your recipients of that. But I want you to please share your view around the importance of data in boosting trade activity.
That's an interesting one. That's an interesting one. So the thing about data is, if you don't have accurate source for your data collection, then you stand to be misled in your trade activities. And which is why, to a large extent, for me personally, having the right mechanism for collating data at the national level is critical for us as an entity. Because most of the time we see information being made without any, we see decisions being made without any concrete source of data backing such decision-making processes. And you wonder, and you're like, okay, so what's the basis for this? Is it really justifiable, or is this a means for you to do that? So I'll use AFEX as an example. One of the things we did when we started our business was to find out, okay, we want to trade in commodities. We are set up a commodities business. What are the key things that we require to be able to thrive in this market? And we were looking for data on these commodities, like what's the volume produced locally, what are the prices of these commodities. And we discovered that very few entities actually in the country have this data set in place. And by default, if you're coming from the international community, even locally, when you're carrying out research and you want data on agriculture in Nigeria, where's the first place you go to? You go to FAO Stats, you go to World Bank, you go to all these other international organizations. And the funny thing is, these guys developed the data, the algorithm they use for estimating the data years ago, and they just build on it to extend the validity. Now, if you look at the reality on ground, there needs to be more structures put in place to ensure that data collation is as seamless as possible. Price of commodities. What's the price of maize in Nigeria? If you go to other sources, you just see estimates and you'll be like, okay, what is it? So what we're doing at AFEX is ensuring that there's a systemic approach to gathering data and the presentation is as clear as possible. So there's no ambiguity and there's no room for us to be debating when I tell you that the price of maize is 220,000 naira per metric ton. Because the methodology for collating it and disseminating it is very clear. And it's very simple for us because we base our decision making on the back of an international organization. So when they set cocoa price in the international market, for example, we don't ask who's consuming it, we don't ask where is it going from, we don't ask where is it coming from. Because the way the price is determined is clear to all, and you know that if you go to the ICE exchange, you know the price of cocoa and you can work with that. So can we walk back and build something for Nigeria? Can we use that price and use it to estimate what we have and then at the same time collate data value and use it to share information for all key market participants? So one of the core things we're doing is ensuring that data that is required to make sound information decision across board is readily available at our fingerprints. That's why we share all those data free of charge. We give it to you. We give it to you to be able to make your decision, and we expand the scope across different commodities. So for us, we even publish two sets of data. One that is based on trade executed on our platform because we know people want reliable, trusted sources. And we go a step further to ensure that we can put an estimate on what is going on in the global market to give you a perspective on what is not being executed, what is available. And I think as a nation, we need to expand our resources to be able to do this. It's good to know that over the last couple of years, there's been a concerted effort across all government organizations to harmonize our data sets, right? So for example, the first set is, can you identify people in the country, right? And we've been putting structures in place to harmonize all those data sets that have been siloized before now into a single one, so they are all linked. Then you go forward and then a smallholder farmer that produces maize, in the next 3 to 4 years, we will estimate what it produces every year and who's buying what it's producing so that there's traceability across the system. Because for data, accuracy and integrity of data is key. And when you impose that on agricultural produce, ability to trace and ascertain the source of those data sets is very, very critical, which is the infrastructure we are building and working with other key stakeholders to ensure that we could expose into the market to ensure availability of this for sound decision-making process across board.
Okay, thank you for that. I can see I'm running out of time, but I have a question for you. I must ask you this question. In terms of competitiveness, right, what sectors or products would be best to focus on for first-time exporters or for those who are just interested in investing in an export value chain? I have to ask you that question. So please. Hello.
Thank you for that. And I will try to answer it in 2 minutes. So if you look at Nigeria, and if you look at the current situation we are in, which is why a lot of people think that not every disaster is a disadvantage, cocoa is one of the key produce that we produce in the country. And if you look at the current situation of things, the production outlook is looking very low, but the international demand too is not as low as the production expectation, which means that there's room for possible potential upward movement in price of this commodity. So do you have a structure to buy cocoa and get position in the international markets? Yes, that's one of the things we've developed at AFEX. So if you want to invest in cocoa, just head to AFEX Commodities Exchange, you can buy it and invest there. But aside cocoa, which is one of our key export produce, the other one is ginger, which you could buy into later on in the year. We have some key local produce too that, by all indications, they would add value to the economy and individual investors if entered in at the right time. So if you look at maize, sorghum, soybean, paddy, rice across board, we can take position on all those commodities. And then as the season progresses, we can now be able to supply people who need it and then increase the value to smallholder farmers whilst earning a decent return on your own portfolio as well.
Okay, thank you so much for that. Thank you. I hope everyone took notes on that, because that was pretty important. So I'm just final thoughts from both of my speakers. So Akintunde, what would you say your final thoughts? What golden nuggets would you like to leave our audience with?
I mean, I think final thoughts. I think the continent has spoken for too long. So I speak again, not just from a Nigerian perspective, but from an African perspective. I think that for me, the big idea will be how we transport and how we trade in services. I think that the era of trading in hard commodities is ebbing away slowly. And the focus going forward will be, how do we trade services? How do we trade human capital? You know, how do we equip our young people with the skills that allow these young people serve multiple societies? So for me, it's really, what kind of digital skills are we giving our young people? What kind of digital platforms? What kind of infrastructure? How are we laying fiber optic cables across our country to ensure that our people can export their talents and sit down in the innermost parts of Nigeria, but take jobs from Philippines, from China, from the United States, etc. I think for me, that's where the next opportunity is. If you think about trade in its purest form, we started out, and when I mean we now, I mean the world started out trading humans. So if you think about formal trade, it was slave trade. It then evolved with the abolition of slave trade into oil palm. It then evolved into the trading of petroleum, of crude, right? And I think that we've gotten to a period where what we're exporting now is skills and services. Nigeria has always been behind the curve. And I think that this is an opportunity, even if we're not going to be ahead of the curve, for us to at least be in line with the curve. I think is the final point I would like to leave you with. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Akinyinka, what would you say are your final thoughts? Or what would you like participants to leave this session with?
For me, it's more about businesses changing from business as usual to taking advantage of the platform model to expand your reach in terms of the goods and services you have to offer. If you look at technology stocks that has been gaining ground over the last couple of years, you'll see they are mostly platform businesses. And a key notable example is Amazon, right? Amazon is one of the richest companies in the world and one of the richest owners of businesses in the world. Now, what is there to learn from there? They built a platform model that is there to scale, leveraging on technology. And for me, that is the key thing. The design was not for short-term return on investment or was not for short-term play in the market, but they built a system to last, leveraging on skill. And for them, it is a platform business. And we develop such businesses in Nigeria, that could cross the leaps and bounds of the country to meet the needs of people in terms of goods and services. When we have this in place and provide an avenue or an economy that encourages the youth to play in this sector, then you see that we stand to gain a lot at the government level. Like my brother said earlier, competition across the states is beneficial for the federal government because at that state level, you get to be more productive. When you have more youth being competitive in terms of innovation and technology exports to global institutions globally, you'll discover that Nigeria will stand to gain a lot because your source of revenue, your source of income is not tied to only crude. You've expanded into services that gets to deliver value across, and you leverage on putting internal efficiency and economics of scale amongst your local consumers. So for me, how do we move from business as usual to building businesses that could scale, leveraging on the platform model to drive viability and sustainability across board?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm grateful to both speakers. I personally learned a whole lot, and I'm hoping that the organizers are able to maybe convert this, like transfer, so that more people can benefit from the knowledge that has been shared today, because both of you really, you did amazing. I'm grateful. So there's a poll that's about to come up, and I would encourage participants to please participate. So the organizers, Filii Magna, will be putting out a poll in the next few minutes. It should appear on your screen. So it's up now. I hope you can all see it. I think the first question is, was the global pandemic shutdown a major challenge in your involvement in local or international trade? And then the second question is, has the devaluation of the Naira affected your involvement in trade? It'll be good to see the results. Okay. Maybe we'll give it a few more seconds before we pull it down. Okay, fine. So can we get the results? Or do we have to wait a bit? Can we get the results? Interesting. So for the first question, was the global pandemic shutdown a major challenge in your involvement in local or international trade? 93% say yes, 7% say no. Okay. For the second, has the devaluation of the Naira affected in trade? I'm not surprised with the results. So 86% of participants say yes, and I can imagine why. Okay, thank you so much for participating on this polling activity. So yeah, so I'm going to open up the floor for I'm going to open up to Q&A from participants. I've been the one asking all the questions, to shift away from the driving seat a bit and get questions from our participants. And I see a few coming in. Okay, so let's begin. So I have one from, I can't quite see the name, but I have one. The question says, I have questions on commodities trading in Nigeria. Will this ever grow beyond the current level? I think Akinyinka, I think you'd be the one to answer that.
All right, thank you for that, Mr. David Williams. So for me, it's about, do we have the right structure to promote it locally? right? The key issues around commodities trading has always been standardization, credibility, and trust in the system. Prior to we starting business in Nigeria, standardization is missing in the commodities market, and the market is very, very transparent. It's very, very opaque. And it involves a lot of physical presence, meaning you want to trade commodities, you have to be physically involved. Now, one of the things we've done over the last 5 to 6 years is building a structure that ensures that the same way you could invest in fixed income and commodity and stocks, we have the avenue to create that structure in the commodities market. So over the last couple of years, we've built a standardized network of warehouses that ensures that we get to standardize commodities in there. And after developing that, we create an avenue for investors to be able to play in this market. Currently, we are very, very small in terms of that, in terms of the global market size in the country. But we believe that when we create a structure that attracts retail investors, private investors like yourself and myself to these, we get to grow the commodities trading space and then move it from the physical infrastructure we have to more sophisticated one that ensures all inclusiveness. What you need, for me, is not just increasing the size of what you could trade, but the trading experience. How is it and how seamless is it for you? Our part of trust we at AFEX Commodities Exchange are putting in place. And we've made the registration and onboarding process as seamless as possible, such that if you create an account today, you can actually start trading on commodities almost immediately. And we've created a structure that ensures that there's transparency, there's credibility, and there's quality and quantity guarantee for all transactions, such that there's comfort for the end users wherever they are when they invest in commodities. This is the first step, and we set to create more avenues for this to increase the capacity across the country and the reach for everyone to play in the commodities space.
Okay, thank you for that. I hope the person that asked the question is satisfied with the answer. There's another question from Yola Bello. We go from here. Will the Naira continue to affect trade in Nigeria? I think anyone can answer that question.
Thank you.
So who would like to answer it? I can answer it as well, but who would like to answer it?
Look, I mean, I'll speak as the public servant, right? So I think we've highlighted this in the course of this conversation, right? I think Nigeria is one of those countries where everyone, including your barber, your market woman, even your children, have a view on where the exchange rate should be. I mean, it's unnatural, right? So the conversation isn't really about a figure, and I think we must remove the fixation from, the Naira exchange at 100 Naira 50 years ago, and because it exchanges at 500 today, that means things are worse. It doesn't necessarily mean things are worse. The problem we have is just that we haven't supported that devaluation with an export-focused economy, right? So because technically, I mean, if you were earning in multiples of the devaluation of the currency, right, your real income relative to, your real income has effectively grown. So for me, it's really not what the rate is, it's how predictable and how transparent the determination is. And I think that's where the focus should shift to. It's not on a figure. It's not on 380 or 400. There isn't a perfect figure. There's an exchange rate for every time. I think for me, the real focus is how do we determine what the Naira exchange is at, and what kind of trade policy are we trying to implement, right? So if we were very strong about an export discipline-led policy, then a devaluation in the currency is a natural accompanying decision, to that. So for me, I think the question should be, should we have a predictable rate? And that predictability is what drives improved investor confidence and what drives trade.
Yeah, so of course I agree with everything you said. Just to shed or sprinkle some extra light, a depreciation or devaluation should be a plus for a country that is export oriented, like China. Now, of course, trade has two sides, which is import and export, and Nigeria is very heavy on import, so import dependent. So my answer to that question would be, if whoever is asking the question is asking from the lens of being an importer, of course, the shift that we're seeing in the Naira or the FX market will have a significant impact, which is negative or adverse on a trader. But if we're trying to push towards this export orientation or boosting export activity, then it actually should be seen as a plus in some way. But on to the next question, back at you, Akin, for you. On trade wise, can we do more on a state level? A lot of countries like Nigeria, but quality is such a big issue for us countries abroad. I don't know. Do you understand the question?
I think I do.
Okay.
Look, I think honestly, from a trade perspective, subnationals don't operate outside the country, right? So the enablers of trade are things that are usually on the exclusive list, right? Like customs, for example. So you find that regardless of how attractive you want to make your subnational, what is really important is focusing on the national issues, right? The issues that states cannot resolve. But what I like is the whole concept of special economic zones means that you can carve out or excise a certain sector, right? And as a subnational, crowd in the right private capital and capabilities and subject yourselves to certain exemptions from what is a fairly, it might even be a more restrictive national policy. So I think that one of the things that states should do a lot more of is just understand how to develop that SCZ infrastructure. And that could be across various things. It could be across agriculture, it could be across services, you know, it could be across oil and gas, like we've seen in a number of places. But ultimately, look, what makes subnationals more competitive, you reduce the cost of doing business, you ensure where you can that there's predictable policy in place. And if we all do that, then Nigeria benefits as being the sum of the parts. You know, so that's where I think I'll situate that question. But it's not something that subnationals can do alone. You know, there's still a lot that depends on what the sovereign does, because the key issues are issues that are dealt with at country-wide level. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. The next question I have here is, what new foreign commodities can one invest in? So, Akinyinka, would you like to take that one? I think it's similar to what I had asked you, but maybe you can share extra.
Yeah. Nigeria has a lot to offer in the international markets, but like I mentioned earlier, the absence of credible value chain activities are what has always been mitigating these efforts, right? And we've seen a lot of private sector individual playing in this sector, exporting commodities globally. So ginger and cocoa are the ones I mentioned because they're the ones we play in as AFEX. But over the last couple of years, we've seen an increase in terms of exportation of commodities, metal commodities outside the country because of the demand for it. However, the standardization and structure in that market from a national perspective is still very, very much absent. And one of the things we have in our strategic plan for the next 5 years is to build a robust market where commodities, metals, extractive commodities like metals and coal could be seamlessly traded on an exchange with full participation of retail and institutional investors. So we are putting structures in place to accommodate that. But right now, every focus is still on cocoa and ginger because we see those as low-hanging fruits that we could easily export at the moment. There's a lot of demand across the soybean value chain, oil palm value chain as well. And then the infrastructure for those two are in place, and there are some that you could play in through the exchange to export into the international markets as well.
Thank you so much for that. I hope that answered the question.
I
hope, yeah, because I know that you're going to get a lot of questions that are focused on that. I have another one that says, what new foreign markets can one invest in terms of diversification?
I mean, I think in as much as international markets is very attractive, we need to still put more focus on the local markets before we start looking outside. And if you look at the local market, there are lots of inefficiencies across board that by attracting the right investments in a structured manner, you could put more value in the local economy. Theoretically, if you look at what we were taught in school, when a country has gone through devaluation or its currency is highly devalued, or there are inefficiencies like we find ourselves in Nigeria, this is the best time to invest in the local economy because then you have an opportunity to immensely grow your portfolio. But if you still want to play in the international markets, then the thing will now be how do you put structures in place to ensure that your local sourcing activity is as seamless and efficient as possible. Unfortunately, that is not the case obtainable in Nigeria as it is right now. The cost of doing business locally is very high. And when you get to the export market as well, the other costs that you incur are likely to increase drastically. So when the example was given of moving goods between Nigeria and Benin, that is just across the border here, you have more than 10 checkpoints that imposes their own taxes on what you're moving out there, which makes the goods that you're exporting from the country not competitive. Now, two options is available for us at the national level or as a country. The first is we can take the approach that China employed some years ago by locking its border and then focusing on promoting internal activities and structure to increase its capacity to service its local markets and then putting more structures to attract foreign trades. That may not sit well with a lot of people because when you operate in democracy, then you don't go through that route, right? You would rather put a structure that promotes international investments into your country to boost your local production. But the other thing is now, as a country, we now need to look at what are the things we need to put in place to attract foreign investment into the local economy. And we've seen a lot of interest in the international market in playing in the Nigerian local market. And the limiting factor has always been the uncertainty around our currencies. We've had innovative structures around there, entities like FMDQ, putting in structures in place for you to be able to hedge your Naira, your FX risk in some cases, and then a lot of policies here and there, but still the risks are there. And as an investor, as a foreign investor, I want to invest in a local economy, which I could lose my value overnight due to policy somersault or change in policy direction. So before I divert too much, to answer your question, I would say there are opportunities for you to export more in terms of commodities. Nigeria's commodities, due to the organic nature and the uniqueness of those commodities, makes it attractive for the international markets. But you also need to take a look at the cost of sourcing this locally and the efficiency of scale you need to be able to key into to be able to enjoy the benefits of the international markets. Our cashew nuts is another key example of one of the products that are produced locally with very much high international demand. That putting the right structure in place will give you a very, very huge upward trajectory when you play in this market.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that response. I have another question here. What incentives can subnational governments put in place to increase exports? So that's going to Akintunde.
I mean, great question. I think subnationals, obviously there are a bunch of things, right? So one is what kind of fiscal incentives can we put in place? If you're operating out of a free trade zone or a special economic zone, then you get the benefits of the nationally determined, incentives for such areas. So that's one. I think the bigger one is really reducing the cost of doing business, right? So if you don't get harassed by state government and local government officials every now and again, then you are given the peace of mind to focus on what you do best, right? Meeting customers' needs and solving problems. So for me, the biggest incentive will always be reducing the cost of doing business and just restrictions that entrepreneurs have and exporters have. The second will be, how do we solve last mile transportation, right? So transportation to the ports, whether it's an airport or a seaport. And so it's really around what kind of transportation infrastructure exists in the States. 3, for me, which is an existential issue, is security. How secure is the location, right? Can people come in there and do business, without any threats to their lives or their property? That's another critical enabler. I mean, I think for me, those are the three major issues. The fourth, which is less of an issue but is also important, is the framework in that location to enforce contracts, right? So in that subnational jurisdiction, if there are disputes with suppliers, if there are disputes with off-takers, etc., how quickly are those disputes resolved, and how efficiently are those cases dispensed with? My view is that if you solve for these 4 areas, you potentially will be a super attractive destination in Nigeria. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I have a question. I think I'm still allowed to ask questions, and it's for you. I just want to know your thoughts around empowering indigenous within states with the skills. So you know how each state has their own comparative advantage. When we talk about unemployment rates, this is something I always give as a reaction that state governments should look at their comparative advantages and then think of empowering their indigents with the skills that would enable them harness whatever commodity, whatever product within their state, at least on the supply side, because you just answered on the demand side, from a demand side perspective, but at least from the supply side, that pressure on the unemployment rate. I just want you to share your thoughts around that.
So, I mean, I completely agree with that. The proof of that for us in Ekiti, for example, is we just recently announced the partnership with Microsoft on the Global Skilling Initiative program. And the reason we're doing that is we've taken a bet on the knowledge economy. And so while we are on one hand encouraging broadband providers by reducing the right of way charge to lay fiber into Ekiti, the biggest driver of the technology industry is the availability of talent. So we're also training our people, leveraging the traditional Ekiti heritage of being people who have a thirst for knowledge. We're also now saying, hey, come and be trained. The state government will cover the cost of your certification, right? And the idea is to build an army of, maybe not an army, but a pool of thousands of moderately skilled professionals across various technology disciplines, such that when an MTN or an InterSwitch or a system spec comes to us and says, if we come to open a hub in Ekiti, we can't bring our staff from Lagos. We can tell them that there are 1,000 data analysts here, there are 700 software engineers here, there are 600 UI UX designers here, and we're doing that across various sectors. In agriculture as well, one of the things we're doing working with a number of corporates is improving the farming methods of the people, exposing them to better seeds, supporting them with better soil information to ultimately make sure that they are more productive. So to answer you, Chinwe, my view is that the work of government is to optimize capitalization, is to ensure that people that live within your jurisdiction are the best they can possibly be, that you optimize their potential. And the only way to optimize their potential is to train them to be skilled in sectors that you are focused on in that jurisdiction. So I mean, it's a philosophy that I not only agree with, but it's something that we are exhibiting in Ekiti State.
I'm very happy to hear that. Thanks for that. So this is the last question I'm going to ask before I hand over to the organizers, and it's going to Akinyinka. Given your exposure to export activities, what would you say are 3 key issues or challenges that stifle export or make it difficult for organizations like yours to promote export activities? And then what recommendations would you give to curb these issues?
Thank you very much. So 3 key issues. The first is standardization to meet international standards. And that goes down to having structure at the farmer's level, at the farm holder level, to ensure that all the required structures, the way the commodities are treated and graded at that level are in place without you necessarily having to incur additional costs to ship it out. The second key issue I would say, which is very, very pertinent aside standardization, is what I'll call a seamless logistics issue, right? Transportation from farm to port. If you're moving commodities across the country, it takes a lot of time before it gets to port. And that's aside the issues we have at the ports in Lagos, like congestion and all the likes. So for example, a couple of years ago, a friend of mine wanted to explore the rail option to move goods from Zaria down to Lagos. And he was able to supervise the loading of the goods onto a train car. And he had to go for a conference in East Africa. I think the conference was for about 5 days. And when he got back, the trail is yet to get to Lagos, right? And this shows a very, very huge problem. Rail network that is supposed to be very, very efficient takes this much time and is not very cost effective as well. And the alternative is going by road, wherein you have layers of taxes once you're going from one state to the other, coupled with a bad road, and then coupled with a system in which you can't even hold the truck drivers accountable for whatever it is that goes on your truck. So I'll say logistics is another very, very key issue that once we have a solution to, is going to make our export processes as much as seamless as possible. And the third would be the financing part of it. And this, I think, is one of the very, very, very crucial parts, which I am very, very passionate about, and is one of the key focus of our activities at AFEX Commodities Exchange. Can we design a structure in which smallholder farmers, commercial farmers, could have access persistently to low-cost capital that would increase their production capacity and enable them to invest in capital infrastructure that gives them a comparative advantage in exporting their produce out? Yes, we do, let's say we do 1 million tons of cocoa exports. That is still under capacity based on what we have. And the key driver for this is absence of financing of this key infrastructure. Is there a way to get all key stakeholders in play such that we can design low-cost financing products that these farmers could key into, that will enable them expand their capacity to produce, increase their productivity, and then ensure that they can maximize their revenue on the production that they do locally. Once we have these three structures in place, I believe our play in the international market will be greatly enhanced, and it will give us a room as a country to increase our productive capacity to drive more exports across our commodities infrastructure. Hello?
Thank you so much for that. Yes, I'll think some little issue. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to the organizers. Victoria, are you there? Are you there? Just want to make sure she's there.
Yes, I'm here. I'm here. Yes.
Thank you. So please, thank you to my amazing speakers, because I have personally learned so much from them. Thank you for taking out the time to participate in this well-needed conversation. And again, I will repeat, I think this is the third time I'm saying it, so that the organizers please consider doing this. I think we'll convert this conversation into a transcript that is now shared amongst other people, because it's just too good for us to avoid. Thank you so much for everyone who logged into the session. So over to you, Victoria.
Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you, our wonderful speakers, for such a wonderful session. We really have learned a lot. I'm sure other attendees will attest to that. Thank you very much, Chinwe. And please, right after now, a second poll, we're taking a second poll now. So the team will just put up here. All right, so the poll is here. The first question is, are you interested in an international trade opportunity to grow your business and career? Have you ever been denied entry into a particular country? Would you consider using a professional service company for your travel documentation to another country? Yes, so just go through the poll now. Okay, we're waiting for the results. I believe everyone has answered. Can we proceed now? All right, thank you. Okay, the poll result is out. Yes. All right, thank you very much. Thank you everyone for attending this webinar. I hope we've learned a lot. And yes, the team will put out the record of this on our page. You can check us out on Instagram at Filii Magna, and you can check us out too on LinkedIn and on Twitter, so Filii Magna. Thank you for attending. And yes, there's another career coming up. There's another panel coming up on the 6th of October, Globalization and Career. With the same link, you can register for this. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for attending, and thank you to our speakers once again and our moderator. We're very grateful. Thank you very much. And have a great day. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.
Yes. All right, bye. Thank you.